You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.
Hey, what's going on, Los Angeles? Welcome back to the LA Football Show, live on the LA Football Network, right here in the beautiful LAFB Lounge with the Madman. I'm Ryan Dyrud. If you're watching or listening live on the Mightier 1090 ESPN Radio, thank you so much for making us a part of your day. If you're on podcast, on YouTube, or LAFBnetwork.com, we appreciate you as always. This is your Los Angeles Chargers segment of the show. It's been a fun training camp. It's been a blast. Crowds have been great. We've had great coverage. Our guys, Chargers Unleashed, have been down there often. I've been down there. It's fun to see where this team is, Jamal, and excited to talk about with you. I feel like we haven't been able to go as in depth with the Chargers leading up until now. So today I'm excited to really get in depth with how training camp has progressed so far. So how are you doing, my friend?
Doing well, Ryan. Excited to get into it with the Bolt fam talk. And, I'm really excited about this team, Ryan. And you and I haven't really had a deep Chargers conversation in a minute. And holy cow, this team is one of the three most talented teams in football. We've talked about it. To me, it's Eagles, Bills, Chargers.
Yeah.
And let the expectations soar.
Yeah.
Because this roster can handle it.
Yeah.
And that would be my, plea to the Bolt fan is this is a AFC championship game or bust kind of roster.
Yep. I mean, this is the time we've been talking about a lot, and we love Justin Herbert. We talked extensively about his contract last week and how it was so well deserved, and he's a top 5 guy in this league. And but this is the year to absolutely, if there are doubters or if there are detractors or if there are even ones like us that are maybe a little more critical, this is the year to prove it wrong. Because if you look at who the team is to beat, it's the Chiefs. And outside of Mahomes, the Chargers are better at just about every single position.
No question about it.
Outside of Mahomes and Andy Reid, Chargers are better everywhere else.
Literally. I mean, I don't know if there is a position that the Chiefs are better than the Chargers at any other position on the field except for quarterback.
Yeah.
And you could even argue in terms of just offensive mind. Obviously, Andy Reid is unparalleled at this point, but no slouch in Kellen Moore.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable there. And when you look at Justin Herbert being a top 3, top 4, top 5, top 6 guy, there's not that much of a gap. So even where the Chiefs are better, I mean, are they that maybe like Mahomes is kind of in his own category these days. So, you got to kind of give the 2-time MVP his due. But everywhere else, the Chargers are either better or the gap is so narrow.
Yeah, it's wild. And, credit to the roster construction they've done, credit to drafting, credit to just the organization of, what they've built on paper. Now we need to see it come to fruition on the field, which this is the year. Year 3 of a young coach is kind of that year to see what you have in that coach. And I've been Brandon Staley's probably biggest supporter, maybe to the chagrin of others, but I think he can put it together. But this is the year to see it. So nice little preview there. Before we get deep into it, show is always brought to you by our friends BetOnline. Head to betonline.ag today. Use that promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV. Get you a 50% bonus on your first deposit. Chargers are, I don't have it in front of me, but they're probably pretty high odds as a Super Bowl favorite.
I would think so. I don't have it in front of me.
I'd say top 6 probably.
I think top 6 at least.
Yeah, top 6. So head to betonline.ag. You can throw all your money down there. Obviously with the season coming up, weekly bets are a lot of fun. They got all the futures and everything. Promo code BELIEVE. Tell them the guys at the LA Football Network sent you. Unfortunately, we have to start with some, I don't know if it's bad news. It doesn't seem like there's much concern from Staley and company, but Trey Pipkins has missed some time. Concerning for you, or is it more of a smart play that it's probably just very minor and they're just, obviously playing with a lot of caution here so early in training camp?
Look, I don't think it's that much of a concern when you're that early in the sort of the life cycle of the season. I think it's precautionary. I also don't know if Trey Pipkins is, the vital piece of the puzzle here. Mm-hmm. And I think when you look at where this offensive line is, when you look at kind of all pros across the line, Pipkins is obviously a very valuable veteran presence and does certain things. Yeah. He was signed for a reason. But I think this is something that even if it were a little bit longer term, I think this team, given what they've drafted in years past, who they've picked up, I think they can overcome it.
Well, and I think the fact that, and again, nothing is like, there isn't any concern.
Yeah.
It's a very minor thing, but just looking big picture and macro level, the fact that, you lose Rashawn Slater last year, who was your best, and I don't want to say he didn't miss a beat. Like, you could feel his presence a little bit lost, but they overcame it substantially with how good Jeremy Salyer ended up playing in that. And now the fact they're going to have him in line. And I mean, that offensive line, let me ask you this. I asked the guys, Jake and Dan, this when we did our live show down there and kind of put him on the spot. So I'll kind of put you on the spot too. When you look at this starting five, when you look at Slater, Salyer, Corey Linsley, obviously Zion, and then Trey Pipkins. You look at that five. They haven't all five played together yet in a real game. So that's kind of the hard part in this scenario. But just when you look at the talent and what we have seen out of each guy individually, I mean, where do you stack this O-line in the NFL? Kellen Moore has been great as an offensive line. We know how good Dallas's offensive lines have been talent-wise, but I think also schematically it's taken some of the pressure off those offensive lines. Maybe not pressure off, but they've put them in the right position to succeed. So just kind of where do you stack this offensive line in the NFL?
Top five.
Top five. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's top five. I think you got to think about the Eagles. You got to think Cowboys. You got to think Bills. Beyond that, I think there's an argument to be made. I think when the Niners are kind of rolling, they've got great line play. But I think they're right there, top five, top six. But this is elite. I mean, that's also the other thing, Ryan. It's a great question about this roster. When you say this is one of the three most talented rosters in all of the NFL, it's not like there's high variance. It's not like they're number one in one position group and then 11th in another position group. They are about top 3 to 6 at every position group.
Yeah.
That's
crazy.
Really how stacked this team is, and that's why everyone should be really excited. There's other teams. This year, there's been teams years in the past where you say, okay, when you put it all together, this team's really talented. But in reality, they're just super talented at the skill positions. They're super talented at linebacker. And then, you aggregate, you average, and then you're like, okay, this is a top 5 team.
Yep.
This is a team that position group by position group, I don't think the answer is outside of the top 5 or 6.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you look at the Chiefs last year, they were number 1 at quarterback. They were top 5 offensive line.
Yep.
And then they were very mediocre at receiver.
Yep.
Probably top 1 or 2 tight end.
Yes.
Rookie running back.
Yep.
Defensively, they had Chris Jones.
And that's about all.
And a lot of youth.
Yes.
And guys, obviously, linebacker obviously balled out as young guys.
Yes.
Juan Thornhill at safety turned into be a great late round pick. But it wasn't like they had stars at those positions. So I say that because when you look at this Chargers roster, like the expectation is AFC Championship game. This roster is that good. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
No, look, there's something wrong here. If they don't make the AFC Championship game, short of injury, okay, obviously injury is the equalizing factor in this sport. But if they don't make the AFC Championship game, there's something fundamentally wrong with either Staley or Herbert.
Yeah.
And that may make some fans uncomfortable, but that's the reality.
Yeah.
If you are given all of this talent, and now you have a guy at the offensive coordinator position that has been proven to be very successful with another roster.
With a lesser quarterback. Significantly lesser quarterback. Yeah. He's just a big name quarterback. He's the quarterback of the Cowboys. Yeah, but it's a significantly lesser quarterback. There's no question about that. There's something fundamentally wrong here with either your QB or your coach. Yeah.
Because the QB and the coach is really where the buck ends up stopping. Look at what we just said about the Chiefs. It's Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes is why they are who they are. Obviously Kelsey's kind of a workhorse, but there's not they're not littered with talent everywhere else. So the buck stops with those two.
Yeah. So let's do this. We both think the Chargers are going to be very good, and it sounds pessimistic, but no, we're just very optimistic, and so we have high expectations. When you do look at this roster, and here we are, a week and a half into camp, so last Wednesday. So, there's been a good amount of practices. The pads have been on now for 2 or 3 days. I think literally at every position, they're pretty stacked. But in your mind, is there any position group where there's, again, I don't think there's any concern anywhere on this roster, but is there anywhere you're like, okay, that's the one chink in the armor that maybe could be their downfall. If everything else goes right, if they stay healthy, if schematically things are well, if Brandon Staley's decision-making improves more, which I think it did improve down the line last year for the most part, if it continues improving, if Herbert plays like a top 5 quarterback, is there any position group where you're like, that would be the one spot that maybe a team like the Chiefs, a team like the Eagles, a team like the Bills can hone in on and say, this is what we're attacking?
I think the interior of the front seven. I think that's kind of one area where, look, especially when you look at how it all shook out last year, where the Chargers went a great deal of the season without being very physical in the front seven. And they couldn't really tackle, and they were in the wrong positions, and they were mistackling, and all of these things where they were kind of getting out physical. I mean, there was a game there, Ryan, where, against very poor competition. I mean, I remember that Texans game. You and I talked about that a lot. I mean, the Texans had no business being in that game, and they were out physicaling the Chargers for 3/4 of that game. There were other instances like that. And so for me, that interior, I want to see, obviously, and this is not kind of exclusive to the interior, but I want to see a healthy Bosa. I want to see, and kind of the backer positions. I want to ensure that Kendricks has a lot left in the tank. I want to see what Mack has. I think there's some questions there as to how much is left in the tank.
Yeah.
And so with those guys and how that then balances the interior of that front seven in terms of guys having to play out of position, guys having to play out of rotation, that would be the one sort of watch item, But outside of that, I mean, secondary, you got Derwin. I'm really excited about J.C. Jackson and sort of his progress. You had all of these other guys that balled out last year. Not really concerned about the secondary. Not really at all concerned about the offense.
Yeah.
So it'd be that interior of the front seven.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback on that, I think for me, my concern with the interior is health. Because last year it was like, okay, we had some good pieces, and they just kept getting decimated. Injury after injury. You see Johnson, SBJ, Tito, all these guys going down. So if all those guys are healthy, then I feel pretty good about the interior. My more concern is the edge depth. Because after Bosa and Mack, you got Tuli Tuipulotu, a rookie who, in my opinion, is a little out of position as a true edge. And, you got Chris Rumph, who I think can have
a fair point,
a substantial breakout year. That's about it.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot riding on Bosa and Mack being healthy, which didn't happen. I mean, Bosa's had a very injury-plagued career to an extent. And Mack has overall been very, I think, healthy to an extent, but also is getting out of that age where I don't think he can fully carry the sacking ability by himself. He needs a whether it's a Robin to his Batman or a Batman to his Robin, he needs someone else that can help with that pressure, because when him and Bosa were both healthy, we saw a really nice pass rush. When one of them was out, or when specifically Bosa was out, I don't want to say Mack disappeared, but he definitely wasn't the same Mack that can get out of those double and triple teams, which, rightfully so. The guy's getting older in age. So for me, it's just, the depth of the edge, but also how creative will Staley get in the rush game that's not going to require so much pressure on those two guys. Can he do stuff interior? Is he going to be bringing Kendricks, up the middle on some stunts like he did with Drew Tranquill last year? And to end my rant or my ramble there, I spoke with a good friend who covers the Minnesota Vikings, and he said that's a part of Kendrick's game that kind of got taken away from Coach Zimmer. As great as a defensive mind as Zimmer is, he kind of took away the pass rushing ability of Eric Kendricks. And so I'm excited to see if Brandon Staley goes back to that well and uses Kendricks as that kind of X factor, if you will, in the rushing game, or if we see Kenneth Murray take on more of that like he did, 2 years ago, and then they shifted him back to being more of an inside backer. So there's a lot of, I think, interesting things they can do. But in order to not expose the depth of the edge, they're going to have to get a little creative with the interior and with the backers.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great point, Ryan, about can Kendricks offset in a non-traditional way the pass rush, because the pass rush is just the equalizer in today's game. And obviously offenses are so far out in front of these defenses, but if you've got an elite pass rush, it gives you that opportunity. On the flip side, if you have a subpar pass rush, it changes your whole game plan. Because if you can't consistently get pressure on the opposition's quarterback, not only are you going to give up points, not only are you going to give up yards, not only are you going to lose the time of possession battle, but it changes your thinking offensively. It changes how you approach plays, time management, aggressiveness. And, the one element with sort of Kellen Moore over the years in Dallas, been clock management. And when you think about Dallas losing some big games, not just playoffs, but some big regular season games, invariably it's come down to managing the end of games either through clock or through timeouts. And those things become just even more magnified when you can't feel like you can get a stop at the other end when you need it. And so that, to your point, I think it's a great one. That's the one thing that could kind of derail the flow of this team. Now, they're talented enough, hopefully, that they can sort of overcome some of those things. But that, to me, is the one watch out.
Yeah, and it changes everything, right? It changes the secondary and the pressure you put on the secondary. And obviously, Derwin is Derwin. We know how great he is. J.C. Taylor really broke out last year and is probably going to be a starter this year, or a very used corner, whether it be nickel, star, whatever you want to call him in that position. Asante Samuel Jr. continues to get better. If J.C. Jackson is fully healthy, great. Mike Davis obviously had a reemergence last year. But if you aren't getting any pressure, whether it's from the edge, the interior, or whatever, it totally changes how the secondary plays too. And then they start, I think Alohi Gilman probably wins the starting job next to Derwin as that safety. But he's probably the weakest link. I wouldn't call him a weak link, but the weakest of that secondary. And if you all day to throw, we've seen it happen to the Chargers where they hone in on, okay, here's our guy. We've seen it happen in college, USC specifically, where the tight end, okay, we know we can attack this part of the field because A, they're not getting the pressure outside of Tuli Pelotu, and B, no one can cover. So this is exactly where we're going. So if that starts to rear its ugly head, that is the one concern. I don't think that will happen, but that would be the one thing on this defense that I would say, okay, that's the one thing that, how are we going to get creative to not let that get exposed? And that's kind of the chess match that these coaches will play.
For sure, Ryan. And I think that's sort of spot on. The other thing that I will watch for is the attention to detail, the meticulousness, and the discipline of how they approach the season. And the reason I say that is, for as talented as this team is, and we have laid out AFC Championship game or bust, I mean, the AFC's murderer's row at quarterback.
Yeah.
And so the difference between getting the bye versus not, the difference between getting the home games, the playoff games at home versus not, make all the difference in the world. And if you have to sort of slide in like they did last year on the road in that wild card and potentially have to go through a Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow, Pat Mahomes to get to the Super Bowl, I mean, that's a tall order for anyone.
Yeah.
So it's great that they're very talented, because they're going to need to be, because of how the murderer's row the AFC is. So to me, this is one of those years where they've been given everything. They have all of the advantages, but there's of course margin for error to make the playoffs. There's margin for error for those things. But to truly be a Super Bowl threat, there actually isn't a lot of margin for error, because you want to be able to navigate that road in the AFC as frictionless as possible. So they can't afford that 2-game lull in the middle of October, because that could be the difference between getting bounced in the wild card or going to the AFC Championship game.
Yeah. We talk about it in college, right? Like, if UCLA can just eliminate that bad loss.
Exactly.
Chargers this year, they can't have a bad loss.
Yep.
I mean, you look at this AFC, because guess what? The Broncos are going to be a lot better this year.
Exactly.
They're not going to be a 5-win team. They're going to be, at minimum, probably an 8-win team. That's what Sean Brayton brings. You look at everything you mentioned, the Bills, the Chiefs, obviously, the Bengals, the Jags, improvement from at the quarterback position of potentially the Colts, the Texans. All these teams are just getting better and better. And so, you can't have that bad loss at all. There's no room for error in terms of wins and losses. There may be room for error inside a game.
Yes.
And they have enough talent to then overcome that.
Yep.
And that's the exciting thing that makes them a fun team to cover and a fun team to be a fan of, because I think they have that ability. So let me ask you this to end with. What do we have? About 3 weeks left to camp-ish? Yeah, three weeks or so. Is there any 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things, could be just one thing, that you are kind of looking for this Chargers team to progress, whether that's more continuity on offense? And, it's hard to really take a ton of takeaways from camp, especially if you're not there. But is there just anything that you're like, hey, in these 3 weeks, this is what the Chargers need to accomplish for that week 1 game against the Dolphins, me feeling really good?
I think I'd love to see the verticality in the pass game, and all indications are that has been happening.
Good so far.
It's been looking really good.
Yeah.
And so just more seamless. I mean, Herbert's got arguably the best arm in football, or one of the 3 best arms in football. But how comfortable and fluid it is for him to just consistently throw the deep ball, I think, is one. I think the other is, how well does Austin Ekeler get integrated culturally?
Yeah.
I'm really looking at his level of engagement, his body language, and because you want to talk about a saboteur of this season, it could be Austin Ekeler.
Yeah.
just in terms of just where he's come from mentally, and he's going to be a big piece. So I'm looking at Ekeler. And then the third is, to your point, Ryan, I'm looking at Bosa, Mack, Kendricks, but particularly those first two to see, how much tread is on those tires. How good do they look? What's the weight? What's the explosiveness? How can we project this over the course of 17 games? Those would be my top three.
Yeah, I agree with all those three. The thing I'll add to that is, because I'm not concerned about the offensive line. I think they're going to be really good again this year. Or again, we're not concerned about any of this. Just the points we're looking for improvement on. But I think the offensive line is going to be great. Herbert already, he's going to be great and already looks comfortable in this offense. It seems like it's been a very seamless integration into this offense. To piggyback on your point about Ekeler, I want to see a clear-cut RB2.
Yes.
I think for 2 years since Staley's been here, there hasn't been that. His first year, they basically had a different RB2 every single week. Last year, it was kind of like they leaned into Joshua Kelley, but then they pulled the rainbacks and tried someone else. I want a clear cut because we know Kellen Moore's system really likes to feature two backs.
Yes.
And so I want to know, going into the Dolphins week, is it Ekeler and Joshua Kelley? Is it Ekeler and Isaiah Spiller?
Yep.
Is it Roundtree? Whoever it is, who's going to be the running mate with Ekeler that we have confidence of, okay, these are the, whatever we're going to call it, thunder and lightning, pass catching, running, whatever you want to call it, but who's the guy that's going to really have a stranglehold in this offense, and we're not every week wondering who's dressing and who's not. So that's my biggest thing is RB2.
Love it. And I'm hoping that RB1 is clear cut.
Yes, that too.
So,
maybe
that's also
Ekeler's
step
RB2.
one, is that RB1 is clear cut and ready to lock in. But it's a great point. But I'll close with this, Ryan. Talent is higher than it's ever been with the Chargers, but expectations are higher than it's ever been with the Chargers, and margin for error is as thin as it's ever been with the Chargers. Those are the three vectors going into this season that make it very dynamic.
Yeah, it's sometimes you wish they were in the NFC right now because they would probably skate their way to the Super Bowl.
For sure.
But if you're a professional athlete, best in the best, this is how you want it.
This is how you want it.
You want to have to get there and prove yourself, and they'll have to do that in spades. So all the time we got for Chargers Talk on the LA Football Show. If you're on radio, thanks for hanging out with us for 2 hours. It's a blast as always. Podcast, have a great weekend. Again, all of our Chargers content over at LAFBnetwork.com. Make sure to check that out. For the Madman, I'm Ryan Dowd. Everyone have a blessed weekend. Talk to y'all next week.